And honestly, it's probably one of the hardest dolls I've ever had to categorize. What exactly am I looking at? Is it a collectible, a plush toy, a character design experiment, or is it actually something much more stranger? Because underneath all of this, there's a full silicone body. And somehow, the more I looked at it, the harder it became to categorize. Is it a doll, a character, a further creation, or an Anthro design, or something sitting somewhere between all of those worlds? Honestly, I'm still not entirely sure. Alright, let's finally talk about what this thing actually is. This is the Dolls Castle Rabbitie. And honestly, it's probably one of the hardest dolls I've ever had to categorize. Because depending on who you ask, you will get a completely different answer. Some people will call it a silicone doll. Some people will call it a furry doll. Others might describe it as an Anthro bunny character. And then there are people who would simply say, yes, that's definitely a rabbit girl. And honestly, none of those answers are completely wrong. Rabbitie sits in a very unusual space between traditional dolls, furry culture, Anthro character design, and fantasy collectibles, which is exactly why I wanted to review it. So today we are going to look at the design, the fur system, the skeleton, the functionality, the maintenance requirement, and most importantly, whether Rabbitie is actually worth buying. So first impressions, I have to admit, it's actually kind of impressive. Then after about 10 seconds, your brain starts asking questions. Why does this exist? Who approved this? And maybe most importantly, why do I kind of like it? The overall design is obviously inspired by anthropomorphic bunny characters. If you've spent any time around furry culture or Anthro network, you will probably recognize some familiar design language here. Large expressive ears, stylized facial proportions, a compact body design, and a strong focus on character identity rather than realism. This is not trying to look like a real human, and honestly, that's probably the right decision. Because Rabbitie's biggest strength isn't realism, it's personality. You immediately know what this character is supposed to be, and in today's doll market, that's actually pretty rare. Now let's talk about the fur, because this is probably the first thing everybody notices. Rabbitie uses a flopped Faux fleece surface, which sounds very technical, but in practical terms, it feels somewhere between velvet and a premium plush toy. And obviously, nothing like a traditional silicone doll. The first time I touched it, I was expecting something gimmicky, but it's actually surprisingly pleasant. It's soft, it's smooth, and under the normal handling, it doesn't immediately feel like it's going to shed all over your room. Now let's be clear about something. If you are looking for hyper real skin texture, this isn't that. And it doesn't pretend to be. This is an aesthetic first material choice. The goal isn't realism. The goal is character immersion. And whether you personally like the concept or not, I have to give Dolls Castle a credit. They fully committed to the idea. Now let's move up to the head, because there is something important you should know. The head and the body are permanently connected. So no head swapping, no modular system, no changing personalities every weekend. Rabbitie has chosen her identity and she's sticking with it. Now at first glance that sounds limiting, but here's where things get interesting. Even though the head isn't detachable, the customization options are actually much bigger than you might expect. And I'm not talking about the makeup, I'm talking about the color. Dolls Castle has received absolutely wild customization requests for Rabbitie. Gray, white, green, brown, black. custom fantasy color schemes. And in some cases, customers have even sent photos of their own pets as inspiration. So while you can't change the hat, you can completely change the character. Honestly, some of these customized versions barely look like the same doll, and that's one of the most surprising things about the Rabbitie. The base design stays the same, but the personality can change dramatically. And of course, the movable ears help a lot because with a character-focused design like this, expression matters. Now underneath all the bunny aesthetics, there's actually a fairly capable internal structure. Rabbitie comes with an EVO skeleton, movable joints, shrugged shoulders, an iOS system, and jelly-style breasts. So despite looking like a fantasy character, there's still quite a bit of engineering going on underneath. That said, it's important to keep exceptions related. There is no heating system, there are no suction systems, and that's largely due to the compact body size. So if you're expecting every premium feature available in the industry, this isn't that kind of product. Rabbitie is very much a character-first doll. The functionality comes second. And honestly, I think that's exactly what it should be. One thing that genuinely surprised me is how manageable this doll is. At around 21 kilograms, it's dramatically easier to handle than most full-size dolls. Moving it is easier, posing is easier, storage is easier. And perhaps most importantly, your bag will probably thank you. The standing performance is also pretty decent, which maybe not sound impressive, but trust me, in this industry, standing is never something you should take for granted. Now for the part nobody wants to hear, but everybody needs to know, maintenance. And with Rabbitie, maintenance actually matters because this fur system isn't something you can treat casually. First of all, always record your unboxing, not because it's exciting, but because something arrives when damaged. Video evidence is a friend. Secondly, do not leave Rabbitie standing or sitting for extended periods. The recommended storage position is lying down. Yes, even Rabbitie believes lying down. When handling the doll, avoid pulling the fur, avoid sharp objectives, avoid excessive force. Think of it like a very expensive cosplay costume. Treat it gently. Cleaning is relatively straightforward. Use water only. Avoid acidic cleaners. Avoid alkaline cleaners. Allow the doll to air dry naturally and perform light powder maintenance once or twice per month. For clothing, loose-fitting outfits are recommended. Avoid dark-colored clothing wherever possible, because once stain occurs, removing it may be not possible. And finally, if fur shedding occurs, repairs may only be partial, so don't test the limit unnecessarily. Trust me, the doll will lose that fight. So after spending time with Rabbitie, who is this actually for? If you are looking for maximum realism, probably not. If you are looking for endless customization through interchangeable hats, also not for you. But if you are interested in furry culture, Anthro, fantasy collections, or simply something that make you completely different, Rabbitie starts making a lot of more sense. It's not trying to be everything, it's trying to be one very specific thing. And honestly, it does that surprisingly well. So design personality, 10 out of 10. Material, 9 out of 10. Functionality, 6. Practically, 9. Realism, 6 out of 10. What I'm looking at, factor, 10 of 10. Overall score, 8 out of 10. So yeah, the Dolls Castle Rabbitie is either one of the most charming fantasy dolls you've ever seen, or a very expensive purchase that you will spend the next 5 years trying to explain to your friends. There is absolutely no middle ground. I'm Ken from AllYourDolls. Subscribe, like, and share for me. I will do more review videos for you. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next review.